The U.S. launching a new wave of strikes on Iran, in response to their surprise attack on American forces in Jordan. The Wall Street Journal says CENTCOM has presented President Trump with a new plan to escalate strikes in Iran. Jackie Heinrich joins me now to talk about it. What do we know about that plan, Jackie?
Well, Ashley, a senior administration official told the Wall Street Journal that the president is in an escalatory mood, but he is still weighing the depth of his response, indicating that the retaliatory strikes on Iranian targets last night, command centers, missile facilities, and defense sites may just be the beginning of whatever his plan is. The Go Big option, as it's being called, was reportedly prepared by the CENTCOM commander, Admiral Brad Cooper, who presented it to President Trump aboard Air Force One after the dignified transfer of the four soldiers recently killed overseas. The option includes 10 to 14 days of intensive airstrikes intended to cripple Iran's missile capability and, quote, if the U.S. wants military action to be effective, Cooper has maintained, the U.S. must step up its air attacks, significantly blunting Iran's missile threat to try to break the stalemate. This Go Big approach, which is among a series of options he has developed, would reduce the need for the U.S. to use defensive munitions because Iran would have less capability to attack, he insists. Critics have warned the U.S. is running low on air defensive munitions. U.S. officials, though, most recently UN Ambassador Mike Waltz, have countered that the U.S. military has everything it needs to conduct this war effectively. Now, in the meantime, the White House is not saying whether another drone strike on a U.S.-owned LNG storage tanker in Egypt is related to Iran or represents a widening of the war. And the president dismissed concerns that Iran is getting help from China.
President Xi told you that China would not give or sell Iran any weapons. And there's a new report that Iran's about to get 400 rocket launchers from China going through Pakistan to Iran.
Well, that would be surprising. I mean, things like that happen, but that would be surprising. He told me very strongly he wouldn't partake, and he knows I'd be quite disappointed.
Meantime, the president is pushing Congress to further tighten the screws on Iran by adding tariffs on Iran to the Russia sanctions bill in the name of the late Lindsey Graham. That bill is slated to pass the Senate later this week, but it only extends the sanctions on Iran through 2031. The president wants the ability to impose 100% tariffs on the top 5 countries helping Iran. And at the top of that list, Ashley, is China.
Not a surprise. Jackie Heinrich, thank you, Jackie, for that report. Member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Tennessee Senator Bill Hagerty joins me now. Senator, are you in favor of this 2-week plan to basically ramp up strikes on Iran?
Yeah, actually, I think Brad Cooper has done an excellent job of conveying to the president his options. And if you think about it, and Jackie did a great job reporting this, but if you think about it, we stopped the execution of the target package that Admiral Cooper was executing when we stepped back to negotiate a ceasefire and deal with the Strait of Hormuz. At that point in time, Brad Cooper was probably 75 to 80% of the way through the initial target package. The timeline that he's talking about, 2.5, 3 weeks, is consistent with what it would take to complete that package. That's a package that includes human targets. It's going to be devastating to the Iranian regime. I think it's time to step up and do it. I'm entirely in favor of it.
And would you favor, perhaps we've taken out a lot of Iran's leadership, should we focus more on the Revolutionary Guard, who many believe is really running the show?
Ashley, those are decisions that are going to be made by the commander-in-chief. I don't want to get ahead of him and second guess that, but at the same time, I just point out that the IRGC are the ones that are driving this. They live a different lifestyle than the rest of the military. They actually profit in times of war, and I think there's going to be a reckoning with the Iranian people over the terrible leadership that has been provided by the IRGC, the terrible decisions that they've made, and they continue to make the wrong decision over and over again. It's the definition of insanity.
I want you to listen to what Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer had to say about how the conflict in Iran is going to affect the midterms. Listen to this.
72% disapprove of his war on Iran. 79% disapprove of what he's done on gas prices. 73% says he has the wrong priorities. And the number of Americans who believe that Trump hasn't done enough to bring down costs has reached 71%. Trump has completely lost the trust of the American people. When the overwhelming majority of Americans say you're taking the country in the wrong direction, you better change course or prepare to lose the election. Trump and his party need to take the hint or take a hike come November.
All right, Senator, let's start there. Will the war be a drag on the midterms for Republicans?
I certainly think if we bring the war to a rapid conclusion, it's actually going to spike all of the numbers that that Chuck Schumer just mentioned. And I think it's rather ironic that Chuck Schumer would be standing there. He's been the height of irresponsibility through all of this. If you think about it, he put us through the longest government shutdown in history, shutting down the Department of Homeland Security at a time that we're in conflict, in major conflict, with the most major state sponsor of terror in the world, knowing that their Iranian regime has put people into this country. He was willing to shut down Homeland Security. He just instructed his party to vote against the National Defense Authorization Bill. It seems that if you step back and listen to what Chuck Schumer says on the floor, that his irresponsibility actually bleeds into almost cheerleading for the Iranian regime. It's hard to believe. I can't believe in my heart of hearts he believes that. But if you listen to what he says, it's hard to argue.
Last question very quickly. I live in Tennessee, and I can tell you the people there, when they talk about democratic socialists of America, they're shocked and perhaps a little disturbed that someone with those policies is getting so much traction. In the end, is that a detriment to the Democrats with regards to the midterms?
Actually, I certainly think so. As soon as people start listening to the platform of the Democrat Socialist Party, and again, this is the poster child, Zohran Mamdani in New York City, AOC, Bernie Sanders. This Marxism, this socialism, this communism is not consistent with the American way. Certainly that's clear in Tennessee, and I don't think they'll get any traction at all.
We'll have to leave it right there. Senator Hagerty,
Thank you, Ashley.
Pleasure to talk to you, sir. Thank you so much.
Likewise.